She couldn't afford dinner, but the billionaire at the next table couldn't look away. The waiting game. The soft glow of candles flickered against cream-colored walls as Emma stepped through the mahogany doors of Bella Vista, one of the most elegant restaurants in downtown. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she smoothed down her vintage navy dress, the one she had found at a thrift store and carefully altered to fit her petite frame. The fabric was soft cotton, nothing luxurious, but it made her feel beautiful despite the frayed hem she had expertly hidden with careful stitching. She clutched her small leather purse against her side, feeling the weight of the $50 bill folded neatly inside. It was all she had after paying rent and groceries for the month. Her part-time job at the local bookstore barely covered her expenses, but when David had suggested this place for their first date, she couldn't bring herself to suggest somewhere cheaper without seeming difficult. The hostess, a tall woman with perfectly styled auburn hair and a warm smile, approached with practiced elegance. "Good evening, welcome to Bella Vista. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Mitchell." "Table for two," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Right this way, please." Emma followed the hostess through the dining room, taking in the soft jazz music that drifted from hidden speakers and the gentle murmur of conversation from other diners. Crystal glasses caught the light from elegant chandeliers, and fresh white roses adorned each table. She had never been anywhere this sophisticated, and the beauty of it made her simultaneously excited and anxious. The hostess led her to a table beside a large window that offered a view of the city's twinkling lights. "Your server will be right with you. Enjoy your evening." Emma settled into the plush velvet chair and placed her purse carefully in her lap. She checked her phone. 7:15 p.m. David had said 7:30, so she was perfectly on time. Actually, she was 15 minutes early, but she preferred that to being late. Her grandmother had always taught her that punctuality was a sign of respect, and first impressions mattered. She glanced around the restaurant, trying to calm her nerves by observing the other diners. At a corner table, an elderly couple shared a bottle of wine, their hands intertwined across the white tablecloth. Near the bar, a group of businessmen laughed over what appeared to be a celebration dinner. The atmosphere was warm and romantic. Exactly what she had hoped for when David had suggested meeting here after they had been chatting online for 3 weeks. David seemed different from the other men she had met through the dating app. His messages were thoughtful and funny, and he had asked genuine questions about her interests in literature and her dreams of becoming a teacher. When he had suggested Bella Vista, she had researched the menu online and carefully planned what she could afford to order. A simple pasta dish and water would be perfect, and she hoped David would understand if she declined dessert. A server approached her table, a young man with kind eyes and a professional smile. "Good evening, miss. Can I start you with something to drink while you wait?" "Just water, please," Emma replied, hoping her voice didn't betray her nervousness. "Of course. Still or sparkling?" Emma hesitated. She had no idea if sparkling water cost extra. "Still is perfect, thank you." As the server walked away, Emma checked her phone again. 7:20 p.m. She smoothed her dress once more and tried to slow her breathing. This was her first date in over a year, and she wanted everything to go well. After her last relationship had ended badly, leaving her both heartbroken and financially struggling, she had sworn off dating entirely. But something about David's messages had given her hope that not all men were like her ex-boyfriend, who had left her with unpaid bills and a broken heart. From across the restaurant, she caught sight of a man sitting alone at a table near the bar. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, his dark hair styled with casual sophistication. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with strong features and an air of quiet confidence that spoke of success. She noticed him glance in her direction briefly before returning his attention to the documents spread before him on the table. Emma looked away quickly, not wanting to seem like she was staring. She picked up the menu the hostess had left and began studying it, even though she had already memorized the prices online. The pasta primavera was $28, which would leave her with enough for tax and a small tip. She had practiced the math several times at home to make sure. Her phone buzzed with a text message and her heart jumped. Finally, David. She opened the message eagerly, but her smile faded as she read the words. "Hey Emma, sorry, but I can't make it tonight. Something came up with work. Maybe we can reschedule?" Emma stared at the screen, reading the message twice to make sure she understood correctly. No apology for the short notice, no explanation beyond the vague "something came up," and no specific suggestion for rescheduling. She had been sitting here for 20 minutes, dressed in her best outfit, with her heart full of hope and anticipation. She typed back quickly, "Oh, okay. Is everything all right? When would be good for you to reschedule?" She waited, watching the 3 dots that indicated he was typing a response. But after a few seconds, the dots disappeared. No response came. Emma set her phone down on the table and took a deep breath. She looked around the restaurant, suddenly feeling very conspicuous sitting alone at a table set for 2. The elderly couple at the corner table was now sharing a decadent-looking dessert, and the businessmen at the bar were raising their glasses in another toast. Everyone seemed to belong here except her. The server returned with her water, setting it down with a flourish. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" Emma's cheeks flushed. "Actually, I'm still waiting for someone. Could you give me a little more time?" Of course, no problem at all. As the server walked away, Emma checked her phone again. Still no response from David. She tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. A heavy feeling settled in her stomach as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She had been stood up. She sat there for another 10 minutes, checking her phone every few seconds and glancing hopefully toward the entrance whenever someone new walked in. But David never appeared and no new messages arrived. Finally, she faced the truth. He wasn't coming, and he had no intention of rescheduling. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back determinedly. She would not cry in this beautiful restaurant surrounded by happy couples and successful people. She had more dignity than that, even if her heart was breaking a little. She began to gather her purse, preparing to leave as quietly as possible. Maybe she could slip out without the server noticing, avoiding an awkward explanation about why her date had never arrived. She could walk home, stop at the corner store for a cheap sandwich, and pretend this evening had never happened. But as she started to stand, the server appeared beside her table with a concerned expression. "Miss, is everything all right? Can I get you anything else?" Emma forced a smile. "Actually, I think there's been a change of plans. I won't be staying for dinner after all." The server nodded sympathetically, and Emma realized her disappointment must be written all over her face despite her efforts to hide it. "I'm sorry to hear that. Would you like me to bring you the check for the water?" Emma's stomach clenched. Even water at a place like this probably cost more than she usually spent on an entire meal. "Yes, please." As the server walked away to get her check, Emma sat back down heavily in her chair. The elegant restaurant suddenly felt cold and unwelcoming, and she wondered how she had ever thought she belonged in a place like this. She was a bookstore clerk who shopped at thrift stores and counted every dollar. What had made her think she could have dinner with someone in a restaurant where a single dish cost more than she made in a day? She looked out the window at the city lights, trying to gather her composure before the server returned. Tomorrow she would delete the dating app and focus on her studies. She was working toward her teaching certificate, and that was more important than trying to find someone who might actually show up for a date. She had survived heartbreak before, and she would survive this disappointment too. From across the restaurant, the man in the charcoal suit glanced in her direction again. This time, when their eyes met briefly, she saw something like concern in his expression. But Emma quickly looked away, embarrassed by the obvious signs of her failed evening. The last thing she needed was a stranger's pity on top of everything else. The server returned with a small leather folder containing her check. Emma opened it nervously and felt relief wash over her when she saw that the water was complimentary. She reached into her purse for a few dollars to leave as a tip, grateful that she wouldn't have to spend her grocery money after all. As she placed the money on the table and prepared to leave, she couldn't help but wonder what David was really doing tonight. Was he genuinely dealing with a work emergency, or had he simply decided she wasn't worth his time? The thought stung more than she wanted to admit. Emma stood up slowly, smoothing her dress one final time. She would walk out of Bella Vista with her head held high, even if her heart was bruised. She had learned long ago that disappointment was just another part of life, and she was stronger than she sometimes gave herself credit for. Acts of kindness. James Wellington had built his business empire by paying attention to details that others missed. As the founder and CEO of Wellington Industries, a company that had revolutionized sustainable packaging, He had learned to read people, situations, and opportunities with remarkable accuracy. But tonight, sitting in his usual corner table at Bella Vista, his attention was entirely focused on the young woman by the window who had been waiting alone for over 30 minutes. He had noticed her the moment she walked in. There was something about the careful way she moved, the gentle manner in which she smoothed her dress, and the hopeful expression in her eyes that had caught his attention. He had watched her check her phone repeatedly, seen the moment when her face fell as she read what was obviously disappointing news, and observed her struggle to maintain her composure in a room full of strangers. James had been stood up himself, years ago, by someone he had thought he cared about. He remembered the humiliation, the self-doubt, and the way it had made him question his worth. The woman by the window carried herself with a dignity that spoke of inner strength. But he could see the hurt in her shoulders as she prepared to leave. When he saw her reach for her purse with trembling hands, something inside him stirred. This wasn't about charity or pity. This was about recognizing someone who deserved kindness in a moment when the world had let her down. James caught the attention of their shared server, Michael, who had been working at Bella Vista for 3 years. "Michael, could you come here for a moment?" The server approached his table with professional attentiveness. "Yes, Mr. Wellington, how can I help you?" "The young lady by the window," James said quietly, nodding in Emma's direction. "I'd like to take care of her evening. Whatever she orders, put it on my tab. But I want you to do it discreetly. Don't mention that it's from me unless she asks directly." Michael glanced over at Emma, who was still sitting alone with her water. "Of course, sir. Should I suggest anything in particular? Let her order whatever she'd like. And, Michael," James paused, considering his words carefully, "treat her like the most important guest in the restaurant tonight. She deserves that level of service." Michael nodded with understanding. He had worked in hospitality long enough to recognize genuine kindness when he saw it. "I'll take excellent care of her, Mr. Wellington." James watched as Michael approached Emma's table just as she was beginning to stand up. He couldn't hear their conversation from across the room, but he saw the server's gentle manner as he spoke with her. After a moment, Emma sat back down, looking surprised and slightly confused. James returned his attention to his own meal, not wanting to seem like he was watching her every move. But from his peripheral vision, he could see Michael bringing Emma a menu and spending time explaining some of the dishes. The server's genuine warmth seemed to put her at ease, and James felt satisfied that he had made the right choice in asking Michael to handle the situation. 20 minutes later, Emma was enjoying what appeared to be the salmon with roasted vegetables, one of Bella Vista's signature dishes. James noticed that she ate slowly, savoring each bite as if she rarely had the opportunity to enjoy food of this quality. There was no pretense in her manner, no attempt to appear sophisticated or worldly. She simply appreciated the meal with honest pleasure. As James finished his own dinner and prepared to leave, he saw Emma signal for the check. This would be the moment when she discovered that her meal had been taken care of. He found himself curious about how she would react. Michael approached Emma's table with the leather folder, and James watched as she opened it with obvious nervousness. But instead of a bill, she found a handwritten note. James couldn't see her face clearly from his angle, but he saw her shoulders straighten and her hand lift to cover her mouth in surprise. The note, which James had asked Michael to write, was simple. "Your grace under pressure tonight has been inspiring to observe. Please accept this meal as a reminder that kindness exists in the world, even when it doesn't always feel that way. You handled yourself with remarkable dignity. A fellow patron." Emma looked around the restaurant with wide eyes, clearly trying to figure out who might have been responsible for this unexpected generosity. Her gaze swept past James's table, but he was studying his phone and appeared not to notice her searching look. Michael returned to Emma's table with a gentle smile. "The gentleman asked me to let you know that there are no strings attached to this gesture. He simply wanted to ensure you had a pleasant evening after." Michael paused delicately, after what appeared to be a disappointing start. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than hurt. "Could you please tell him thank you?" "This is incredibly kind. I believe he knows," Michael replied warmly. He seemed to understand exactly what this would mean to you. James felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the excellent wine he had enjoyed with dinner. There was something deeply satisfying about being able to turn someone's difficult evening into something positive. especially someone who had handled disappointment with such grace. As Emma stood to leave, she paused by James's table. He looked up from his phone with what he hoped was a casual expression, as if he had just noticed her approach. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice carrying a slight tremor of emotion. "I'm sorry to interrupt your evening, but I wanted to ask if you might be the person who—" She gestured helplessly, searching for the right words. James set down his phone and gave her his full attention. Up close, he could see that she was even more beautiful than he had thought from across the room. Her eyes were a striking green-gray like sea glass, and her face had an openness that spoke of genuine warmth. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said gently, though his eyes held a hint of kindness that suggested otherwise. Emma studied his face for a moment, and James had the distinct impression that she was far more perceptive than many people might assume. "I think you do know," she said quietly. "And if you are the person responsible for this evening becoming something beautiful instead of something painful, then I want you to know that your kindness means more than you might realize." James was quiet for a moment, touched by her directness and the emotion in her voice. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Emma," she replied. "Emma Chen." "I'm James," he said, extending his hand. When she took it, he noticed how small and soft her hand was, but also the slight calluses that spoke of someone who worked with her hands. "And if I were the person responsible for your evening improving, I would want you to know that it had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with recognizing someone who carries herself with remarkable strength." Emma's cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't look away. "I don't know how to thank you properly." "You don't need to," James replied. "But if you'd like, you could sit down for a moment and tell me about yourself. I have the feeling that anyone who handles disappointment with the grace you showed tonight probably has some interesting stories to share." Emma hesitated, glancing around the restaurant. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude on your evening." James smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in weeks. "Emma, I think you would be improving my evening considerably." She sat down across from him, placing her small purse carefully in her lap. "I have to admit, I'm not sure what the protocol is for a situation like this. I've never had a stranger buy me dinner before." "Well, I've never bought dinner for someone I hadn't met before tonight," James replied honestly. "So I suppose we'll figure out the protocol together." Emma laughed softly, and the sound made James realize how long it had been since he had heard genuine, unguarded laughter. "Fair enough. Though I have to ask, what made you want to help someone you don't even know?" James considered the question seriously. "I think it was watching you wait with such hope, and then seeing how you handled disappointment without becoming bitter or angry. There's something rare about that kind of strength." "You were watching me?" Emma asked, but her tone was curious rather than uncomfortable. "I was," James admitted. "Not in a creepy way, I hope. But yes, I noticed you from the moment you walked in. You have a presence that's hard to ignore." Emma shook her head with a rueful smile. "If I had a presence worth noticing, maybe my date wouldn't have stood me up." "His loss," James said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made Emma look at him more closely. "You don't even know me," she pointed out. "I know you show up when you say you will," James replied. "I know you treat service staff with respect. I know you handle disappointment with dignity, and I know you have the courage to approach a stranger to express gratitude. Those aren't small things, Emma." They talked for another hour, long after the restaurant had begun to empty. Emma learned that James ran a successful business, but that he often ate dinner alone because his schedule made it difficult to maintain friendships. James learned that Emma worked at an independent bookstore while finishing her teaching degree, and that she had moved to the city 2 years ago to start over after a relationship that had left her financially and emotionally depleted. "So you're going to be a teacher," James said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "What age group?" "Elementary, hopefully," Emma replied, her face lighting up with enthusiasm. "I love working with kids that age because they're still so curious about everything. They ask the best questions." "That sounds perfect for you," James said, meaning it. "You have that quality yourself." "What quality?" "Curiosity, wonder. You ask thoughtful questions, and you really listen to the answers." Emma blushed slightly. "My grandmother always said that was the secret to learning anything worth knowing." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Emma said softly. "She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She taught me that kindness and curiosity were the most important things a person could possess. James felt something tighten in his chest. He had lost his own parents young, though not in such a tragic way. His had simply been too busy building their own careers to pay much attention to their son. Emma's loss was different, but he recognized the particular strength that came from having to grow up too quickly. "She would be proud of who you've become," he said quietly. Emma's eyes shimmered again, but this time the tears were mixed with happiness. "I hope so. I try to live up to what she taught me." When they finally parted ways that evening, James offered to drive Emma home, but she politely declined, saying she enjoyed the walk and needed the fresh air to process the unexpected turn her evening had taken. James respected her independence, but he insisted on at least calling her a taxi. "Thank you for everything tonight," Emma said as they waited for the cab to arrive. "Not just for dinner, but for treating me like I was worth your time." "Emma," James said seriously, "you are absolutely worth anyone's time. Don't let one thoughtless person make you question that." As the taxi pulled away with Emma inside, James felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine hope. Not the calculated optimism that came with business success, but the kind of hope that comes from connecting with another person in an authentic way. He had no idea if he would see Emma again, but he knew that their conversation had reminded him why human connection mattered more than any deal he might close or any profit he might earn. Sometimes the most important moments came from the simplest acts of kindness, and sometimes those moments changed both the giver and the receiver in ways neither expected. As James walked to his own car, he found himself already looking forward to the possibility of seeing Emma's genuine smile again. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. If you enjoyed She Couldn't Afford Dinner, but the billionaire at the next table couldn't look away, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories. Your comments mean the world to me. Let me know what you thought and what kind of stories you'd like to see next. Until next time, keep reading and stay mysterious.